Welcome back to another podcast with Mr. Hagan. On this podcast, we're going to continue to talk about costs, but to think about costs, we're now going to have to break costs down into the short run and the long run. And normally when people hear short run and long run, they think about specific time periods. Like the short run maybe is a year and the long run is 10 years. That's not how we're going to think about it. We are not going to think about short run and long run in terms of specific define time periods. Instead, we're going to use the idea of inputs to define what we mean by long run and short run. So just a quick review. Remember, inputs are factors of production. They are factors of production, or sometimes what we call resources. And these are the resources that are used to produce goods and services, which really means that we're talking about land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurial skills. Land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurial skills are our inputs used to produce some good or service. So let's just get a picture going here. So let's say that we have some factory, and so here's my. We're going to say this is a car factory and not on some sort of antenna or something. And and here's some big garage entry or whatever. And in this factory, we produce automobiles. So our output that's coming out over here is going to be our automobile. So here's an automobile that we just produced. And of course, we're producing lots of other automobiles, and so we produce cars, and then we need to talk about the inputs that we use to produce those cars. So, what are some of the inputs that are used to produce the car? Well, we hire workers, of course. We hire labor, and we purchase machines in order to produce the automobiles, and we build factories in order to produce the automobile. So these inputs go into the firm, and then the firm uses those inputs to produce an output over here on the other side, and that's the automobile. And so the question is, of these inputs over here, which one of these inputs over some time period can be varied, and therefore we call them a variable input. A variable input is an input that can be varied. It can be varied over some time period. And then there are other inputs that are fixed, and if they're fixed, that means that we cannot vary the input over some time period. So the question is, which one of these inputs would be variable, and which one of these inputs would be fixed, and it really depends on your time period, and that's where time comes into this whole idea. So let's think about a 1 year time period. If we want to think about 1 year, so let's say that in 1 year, let's say that one year from now, that we want to increase our output. We want to produce more cars. We want to increase our output 1 year from now from where it is. And so the question is, what could we change in terms of our production in order to make this happen? Well, I would say within a 1 year period, we could go hire more workers. And so we could increase the number of workers that we hire. We can increase workers, and so that would make workers a variable input. We could change it over that 1 year time horizon, and we could probably go buy some more machines. So if we wanted to increase output, we might have to buy more of the machines that we use to produce output and to produce cars, and so that could be increased over a 1 year time period. And so within that 1 year time period, we would call these inputs variable. We could change them. We could increase number of workers. We could build or purchase more machines. Those are variable. We could change them over this 1 year time period. Okay, now the question then is about our third one. Our third variable, our third input, is the factory. Now, what about the factory itself? Well, I'm going to argue that in a 1 year time period, that's not enough time to go build a new factory. That takes a long time. We have to get zoning permits. We got to decide where to build it. We got to put out a contract. The engineers got to come in and develop what we want the factory floor to look like. There's lots that goes into it. And so in a 1-year time period, we cannot change the number of factories that we have. So in a 1-year time period, we're going to say that the factory is a fixed input. It's fixed. We cannot change it. We cannot alter it given the time period of only 1 year. Now, this allows us then to think about the difference between short run and long run. So let's think about short run. Short run is a time period over which at least one input is fixed. There's at least one thing that can't be changed. So would we say, for the car company, would we say that 1 year is short run analysis? And the answer is yes, because we have at least one input that is fixed, that we cannot change. And so that is what the definition of short run is. Now, the long run, that's the time period over which all of your inputs are variable. So let's think about this. Let's think about how long would it take to build a new factory? And let's say to build a new factory would take 8 years. From the moment that we think of the idea that we want to increase production to we need to design the factory floor, we need to put out a contract, we need to get zoning permits, we need till they come in and they break ground and actually build it, and until the factory is actually up and running. Let's say that's an 8-year time period. So now we can let's think about an 8-year time period. So in an 8-year time period, what can we say? If we want to increase output, we could increase output. In a 1-year time period, if we want to increase output, we can only hire more workers or purchase more machines. We cannot change the number of factories in a 1-year time period. So this is short run analysis. But if we have 8 years, now what? If we have 8 years, well now, if we have 8 years, we can hire more workers. We can increase number of workers that we have. We can increase machines. We can purchase more machines in order to increase output over an 8-year time period. And we can also increase our factories. We can build a new factory. And so all of these become variable inputs. These are all variable. And then what would we say about fixed inputs? We would say that there are no fixed inputs over that time period. There are no fixed inputs over this 8-year time period. So for the car company, we would say the short run is defined as, 1 year. That would certainly be short run. And the long run, that would be an 8-year time period. So really what we would say is anything less than 8 years would be the short run, because something would be fixed. Anything longer than 8 years or longer, that would be considered to be long run analysis, because everything is variable. Everything can be changed. Nothing is fixed. There are no fixed inputs. Now, notice this might be entirely different from for a little landscaping company where everything can be varied within 3 months for the landscaping company. So for the landscaping company, if we have a landscaping company, let's see, in a 3-month time period for the landscaping company, they might have, what are their inputs? It might be lawn tools, lawn mowers, and weed whackers and whatever, and then they also have workers, and then they have a truck. They have a truck with a trailer in order to drive around the workers and transport the lawn tools. So let's say within 3 months, any of these can be varied. Any of those can be varied in a 3-month time period. They can buy a new truck. They can hire more workers. They can buy more lawn tools. So hear what I'm saying very clearly. So for the car company, the long run for the car company, the long run is 8 years. It's 8 years. When we're sitting down and thinking as a car company, what are our plans over the next 8 years? We're thinking about a long run analysis. When we think about plans for the next 3 years for the car company, that would be a short run analysis, because it's less than 8 years. Okay, something's going to be fixed. But when we think about the landscaping company, now the long run is 3 months. Anything less than 3 months would be short run analysis. Anything longer than 3 months would be long run analysis. So you see, the short run and the long run is determined not by some specific time period, because it's going to be different for the car company than it is for the landscaping company. It's not defined by a specific time period. The distinction between long run and short run is determined by how many of your inputs are fixed or variable. How many of your inputs are fixed or variable? Now, let me say one last thing before we're done with this video. And that is in the future, on future videos, instead of talking about variable inputs and fixed inputs, we will start to talk about variable costs, and fixed costs. We'll start talking about variable costs and fixed costs, and they are very similar concepts. Over what time period could you alter your costs, and over what time periods are some of your costs fixed? You cannot change them over some time period, but we'll talk about that on a future podcast. All right, so thanks for joining me. This has been Mr. Hagan on another podcast, and we'll see you on the next podcast.